Ruin My Childhood.
Thank you for listening to Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where we decide if some things are better left in the past. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kat.
And, Kat, what are we doing today?
We're covering Beverly Hills 90210.
We are. So, unfortunately, just a couple of days, actually, I think it was a couple days after our last episode came out, Luke Perry unfortunately passed away from a stroke at the age of 52, which is far too young.
Mm-hmm.
And we were planning on covering this show eventually anyway, so we figured, why not do it now and kind of just honor his memory and watch what he was most known for. Yep. I mean, I actually know him more from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but this is what he's probably most known for.
I did not watch Buffy.
Not the TV show, the movie.
That either.
Oh, they're both Joss Whedon.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, he actually created the character. All right, so did you watch this show at all, or do you have any recollection of this show?
I probably just watched a couple of episodes because I was far too young to be watching this show when it was actually on. But my older sisters would occasionally sneak an episode.
It actually went until we were 12 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know how long it actually went. I figured it was like 4 or 5 seasons. It went from 1990 to 2000.
That is a darn good run.
Yeah, it's a long run. I remember some things. My mom was obsessed with this show. My parents are a little bit younger than your parents. So when this show came out, my mom was only 22. So this was like right in her wheelhouse.
Right.
So I remember a handful of episodes towards the latter end of the series. I definitely remember like a love triangle between Luke Perry's character and Jason Priestley's character and the blonde girl. I don't know the actress's name or the character.
Jenny Garth.
Jenny Garth, yes, her. So I remember there was like a love triangle between them, and I remember it had a kick-ass theme song.
Wait, the dudes had a love triangle, like, with each other?
No, with her. Like, they both wanted her.
That's
and she
far
dated
less
both
interesting.
of them. It's the 90s.
I'd watch that other thing that I just wrote in
You
my
know,
head.
that could be in, like, the newer version of the show, because there's a new version just called 90210 on, like, CW.
Has Shanae Grimes.
Does it?
It does.
Oh, I don't know anything about the new one.
She's pretty.
But the other thing I remember is the kick-ass theme song. It was just this really rad guitar riff. Is like bow now now now, bow now now now.
I think the show is kind of.
That's basically it.
The show is kind of wrapped up with Melrose Place in my subconscious. It's hard to differentiate between the two for me.
I think they might be the same show. Or like spin-offs of each other.
I think they're created by the same person.
My mom watched both of them. I definitely remember my mom obsessing over making sure we had a VHS tape ready so she can record them because she worked like the night shifts. But I know this was a show that we recorded weekly.
Wow.
My mom was obsessed with this show. I definitely remember the theme song, hearing it over and over and over again, but I had no interest in actually watching the show.
Oh, remember back in the day when we used to tape things when we weren't home?
Exactly.
Wow. And then, like, someone would set up their thing to tape, and then someone else would come in and snake it and, like, reprogram it for their show, and then World War III.
Once I got to being, like, I think 10 or 11, my parents taught me how to, like, set up the VCR to record, and I was kind of in charge of doing it. And
I'm surprised you didn't teach them.
No,
most kids like have a pretty good handle on that stuff.
Well, no, I just played stuff. I never recorded things because I was a kid. The only things I watched were like on Saturday mornings, so I didn't need to ever record anything.
See, I recorded a lot of Sailor Moon.
You see, I didn't have to record anything. Everything I watched was like Spider-Man and the X-Men, which was on Saturday mornings. So
right.
The only episode I vividly remember, and this could be the wrong show, but I'm pretty sure it's Jenny Garth's character. She becomes like a nurse or a doctor or something by the end of it. And there's an episode where she's taking care of like an HIV positive patient, and like a blood vial breaks or something. She cuts her finger, and there's a whole like HIV AIDS scare with her.
Oh.
And that's all that I remember from this show.
Sounds pretty edgy for the time.
Yeah, I think it was like a soap opera, but not in the daytime.
Got it. A weekly soap.
Yeah, I think we should just get to our listener comments. We had a lot.
We did.
One thing I'm really impressed with this is there are episodes where we get, very few comments. There are ones where we get a lot of the same thing over and over again, with whether it's a catchphrase or something. But this one, we got a lot, and we got probably the most detailed responses we've ever had.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I even got around to posting on my social media asking for them, because you got so many.
I got so many. Some of them were like essays. Like, I've got one from Edna on Facebook, and
That's my friend Edna. What's up, Edna?
I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's way too long, but it is impressive. So she gave me 10 bullet points.
Dang, Edna!
And then asked if she wanted me to go on, and I said, I think you gave us plenty. Make sure you listen to the episode. But just some...
That's hardcore.
Yeah, so she said her favorite episode was from the first season, called Isn't It Romantic? It was when Brenda and Dylan had their very first kiss. Brenda and Dylan. I didn't know they dated. Okay. And she goes into, she lists like 8 episodes, and then she talks about an episode where like the mob kills people. The mob's in this?
Whoa.
Luke Perry's last episode for a while, when Dylan and Tony get married, and Tony getting murdered hours after the ceremony because there was a hit on Dylan. What?
That's intense.
Brenda flirting with Dean Cain in Paris. I didn't know Dean Cain was on the show.
Is that Dean Cain?
Is that Dean Cain? One of my favorite jokes from John Mulaney. So yeah, it sounds like our friend Edna is a pretty big listener or watcher of the show.
Legit.
Damn.
WV47 said the junior prom where Brenda and Dylan took a room. I was so upset because she was so young.
Oh. Teen sex. What?
Brenda.
That's Shannon Doherty.
Got it.
June Beginning said, it was a fantastic show. Watching it, I enjoyed all the drama and the adventures it showed. Regardless, rich or not, we all have problems. Thank you. All caps, all of it.
Kim Robbins Serrano said, love hurts. Donna called out a name to David that she wouldn't have normally called him to let him know she was in trouble. And that's something I've always remembered if I were to be in a similar situation. Oh, sounds like someone's given, like, hostage situation tips.
Right. Damn. My favorite episode... Oh, I should probably say who this is from. This is from Emily Reynolds 8.
Also known as Reynolds.
No, it's Reynolds. My favorite episode was Isn't It Romantic? That's the second person to say that was one of their favorite episodes. Because Brenda and Dylan just had a spark, a connection that they just clicked the first time they saw each other. And I loved it when Dylan had his family reunion, in quotes, with his dad, and Brenda was there for him, even though he scared her a little. I also love the spring break episode. I forgot what it was called and haven't watched it in a while. But they go to David's house in Palm Springs, and Dylan and Brenda got into a disagreement, but they learned that they are just a combination that is meant to be together, and that they love each other very much. Now I'm going to go and watch that episode. Bye. Wave, heart, starface.
It sounds like people are still really passionate about this show. Linny0708 said, I love Beverly Hills 90210. Season 3, A Night to Remember. Donna Martin gets drunk at the prom. Ooh, Donna?
I think that's Tori Spelling.
Oh, bless her heart.
Bless her heart. Oh, she just grew up the daughter of one of the richest, most influential producers.
Teppanyaki, Grill of Death.
What?
Didn't she have an incident at a Benihana? Like, she fell and then...
What?
Yeah, I have
no idea.
I think she, like, fell into a grill at Benihana.
I think you should look that up.
Aren't they surrounded by tables? Like, I feel like you have to try pretty hard to fall into a grill.
The grill is literally the table. You sit around the grill.
Yeah, but you're supposed to be sitting.
I don't know. Let's just go watch the show.
Well, now I'm Googling Tori Spelling Benihana.
Well, why don't you get
Tori
back to...
Tori Spelling suffers burns after falling onto grill at Benihana. Us Weekly. Legit.
Oh, man. That must be true.
You gotta look out for the hibachi grill, guys.
Jesus.
Don't end up maimed.
All right, well...
She's only 41. Yeah,
she was only... I think she was one of the younger people on the show, because some of these people looked very old for high school students. But anyway, let's go and watch the show, and we'll dissect it when we get back.
All right.
All right, we just watched Beverly Hills 90210.
Mm-hmm.
We watched more than we intended to. Normally we watch the pilot and then like 2 more episodes when we do TV shows. We didn't realize the pilot was a 2-parter, 2-hour episode.
Yeah, holy cow.
And then we watched 2 additional episodes. We watched 4 hours of 90210, which this show went 10 years, so 4 hours is still just a
drop in the
bucket. But that's a lot for, a podcast.
It's a lot for 90210.
So how did you feel about it? Don't tell me if it ruined your childhood yet, but what was kind of your overall feelings while watching the show?
That it was a lot edgier than I was anticipating for that time.
Yeah, it was a little edgy. I did a little research on it. It was originally kind of like set up to be almost like an after school special. Not that it came in on like right after school, but it was set up to be like a teen episode of the week. So there would be like a domestic violence one, a drug one, a drinking one, True Love Waits kind of episode. And then it ended up changing in like late season 2, season 3 to be more soap opera-y.
Mm-hmm.
Because it didn't do well in season 1. It had really poor ratings, but I don't know if they recorded 2 seasons worth of episodes right away, but what they ended up doing is over the summer, they played season 2 when every other drama was on repeats. So basically they had people just watching over the summer, and then by the end of the summer they had a built-in fan base, and then season 3 went on and then it became a hit.
Well, here's the thing. I can understand why... Hang on. Let me gather my thoughts.
Gather your thoughts, girl.
This show was in 1990, right?
The show came out in 1990, correct.
I'm having a hard time understanding where they got the budget for season 1.
Aaron Spelling?
But why? Like, why did he invest in this? Darren Star, of course, he's like, uber successful creator, producer, writer, director now. Back in the day, he hadn't done that much before this.
I have no idea. Maybe they just saw a market for young teenage dramas. I honestly don't know.
At least I don't think he had done a lot before this. It kind of seemed... Well, it's unusual to do a 2-parter pilot and to have an hour-long pilot have it be as fleshed out as it was. Like, it didn't change that much between the pilot and the rest of the episodes.
No, at least not initially.
Which usually happens a lot in season 1 of a show, especially a show that has teenagers on it.
Well, what's crazy about it is... like you said, it's 2 hours. Now, that's not an uncommon thing nowadays. A lot of shows will come and do 2 hours.
If they're highly anticipated.
Right.
Like, from the same creator or something else. Like, if it's Ryan Murphy, of course. They're going to do, like, a 2-hour...
a serious drama on, like, HBO or AMC or something like that. But what's weird about it is, obviously, with it being 90s, it is a little dated and everything. But there was a lot of production value. Like, in the first episode, there were airplanes flying over the set with, like, messages and stuff. Huge
production value. Super hot cast.
Right. It's crazy. And, the way it opens up, it set up a lot of characters. Like, the first episode gets every main cast member. So you got Brian Austin Green. I don't know why I named him first. That's weird. Brian Austin Green is David. Tori Spelling is Donna. Is he still working?
Yeah.
Oh, good for him.
As far as I know.
Steven Ziering. I can't remember. Zach Presley. Is it Zach Presley?
I have no idea.
Zach Priestley. Luke Perry's not in the first couple episodes, but then you also have
Jason Priestley.
Jason Priestley.
Who is Zach
I don't
Presley?
know. I just blanked on his name, and it's funny is he's the one that I actually have seen in a lot more things. But Jenny Garth, Shannon Doherty, like all those actors are developed in the very first episode. Not even like the whole pilot, but I mean the first half of the pilot.
Right.
You get a pretty good idea of who these characters are, what they're about. And they all got a decent amount of screen time, which surprised me, because it kind of set it up like Brandon and Brenda are the main characters of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But they all got really good screen time, and then like you got all these like glamour shots of Beverly Hills, like when they're going to school, you see all these people pulling up in BMWs and a Mercedes, and then a Bentley, and then you see kids walk into class with briefcases, and you see kids on cell phones in 1990, which is incredibly rich.
This show epitomized the sex appeal of Hollywood and Beverly Hills and Los Angeles in the 90s.
And and the pacing was solid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's hokey because it's, 90s and like, but
And
I
it's
can
a teen drama.
and it's a teen drama, but I can see the appeal
Right.
of the show. And, back, it's kind of true that the movie star is not really a thing anymore. Like, the movie star is dead. Nobody flocks to a movie anymore because of a particular actor, really.
Right.
But in the 90s, we still had movie stars, and we were getting new movie stars like Julia Roberts and, big people like that. So the kind of the glitz and glamour of Hollywood and Beverly Hills and everything was still a thing. That's when we started really caring about big designers like, who's that one that got killed that we were watching that show about?
Gianni Versace?
Versace.
You
Right.
need me to jog your memory for Versace?
I'm not in the big fashion, but
Wow.
like, you had like Versace and Calvin Klein and all these people really blowing up in the late 80s, early 90s, and like fashion designers were celebrities. So you had this big culture, and having this show set in that time, I can see why people loved this show.
Right.
Any highlights from the pilot that you kind of want to go over?
Oh, geez. So it starts out very hokey.
Right.
Like, the beginning of the episode, Brandon kind of rolls over in bed and he starts narrating his morning, and you're like, oh god,
I thought it was
are
going to
they
be like
gonna
a fourth
narrate
wall
the
breaking.
whole show like this?
Right.
And I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Like, he doesn't quite look down the barrel of the camera, but just kind of off. So it's
Yeah.
not quite breaking the fourth wall, but he's like,
They
first
just
day of school, new city, new house, don't know anybody, no friends.
they're just
This is
like,
gonna be
we're gonna
great."
cram this exposition
Right.
into him waking up.
Right.
I
He had a
also
cool alarm
love
clock.
I love how they go downstairs and he's like having a conversation with his mom, and he's agitated and she's a little agitated, and she goes from like 0 to 60 and like smashes something on the kitchen floor.
Yeah, she threw something.
I don't even know what it was, but she was in the kitchen, and then he's like, all right, I guess I'm
She
going
threw
to
the
school."
toaster.
She threw the
She
freaking
threw a toaster. So, like, he's kind of like, whatever, like, oh, I gotta go to school. And Shannon Doherty as Brenda, like, is complaining to the mom, like, I should go shopping first. I shouldn't go to school immediately. Like, we need to get new clothes because this is Beverly Hills. And the mom just, like, gets upset and throws a toaster on the ground.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. Like, I think mom might need to check her meds.
Right.
Take a
and-
breathe. Like, moving is stressful.
Right.
Not that stressful.
Well, like, the note that I have right before it, so I don't know if this ties into it, it was, Brandon was popular in Minnesota. They don't sound like they're from Minnesota.
No, they don't.
So I worked for, I don't talk about where I used to work, but I worked for a retail company that was based in Minnesota. And so a lot of my trainings were led by people from Minnesota. My new job, I cover a territory with Minnesota. So I talk a lot to people from Minnesota, and I just don't buy it.
No.
No.
No,
Don't
they're
you
not.
know?
They're not from Minnesota.
No.
Not by a long shot.
My next note is kind of upset me. So at the top of the episode, I talked about how I remember the theme song, and it was iconic. This one kind of had like a little jazzy thing. It was like, it was the theme song that I remember, but it was just kind of like a weird jazz show tune elevator kind of version of it.
It's very much just a placeholder until they saw the ratings.
Right.
And decided which route to
They
take
needed to make it
because they
edgier.
needed to decide if they were going to play up the morality aspect of it or if they were going to play up the sex appeal.
Right.
And I think they ended up finding a strange balance of the two.
Even in this episode, but the thing is, the morality in this is kind of iffy. So
And it's more like bringing social awareness to things because it is still so problematic.
right.
My last note
Go ahead.
on that first episode, I only did 3 notes the whole episode because there was so much happening. It was so hard to follow. My last note in that episode is Kelly, hardcore bitch.
I have a lot more notes than that.
I
but
like Kelly, though.
I did write that down. So we obviously have a lot of episodes we got to go through, so we kind of have to cram through. So I'm just going to do a very high overview of part 1, or the pilot in general. Brenda and Brandon are twins, which we find out towards the second half of the pilot, which surprised me.
No, so they named their kids
Brenda
and
and and they're
Mama
twins.
definitely needs to check her meds.
Right. So they show up to school, and immediately Brenda becomes friends with Kelly, Garth Kelly. Kelly, because Kelly's being kind of mean to like this overweight girl in class, as they say, whoever you sit next to is your lab partner. So she lies and says she's holding the seat, and then Brenda walks in, and that's how they become friends. Brandon kind of struggles his first day. He ends up eating lunch by himself and decides he wants to join the school newspaper, and the editor, Andrea, is kind of like not having it initially. She gives him this test and he fails the test, but he ends up proving that he wants to be a writer. They all end up at this party, and Brandon somehow lucks into randomly meeting the hottest girl in school, who's also the richest girl in school, who happens to be throwing the party, and they have this really deep connection. And ultimately what ends up happening over the 2 episodes is he gets a date with her, and they're making out in a hot tub. And this is where I say it's kind of problematic. And she's like, let's take off all our clothes. And he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I'm still going to be here. Let's like not do that. And he basically slut shames her. And she's like, well, boys are used to me doing this. And he goes, no, you don't have to do that. Like, don't even trip. And he's like, I'm going to kick myself in the morning for it. But he basically was like, yeah, don't do that. And like part of it is we're supposed to see him as the good guy. But also it's kind of like, yeah, you shouldn't be slut shaming.
Right.
And so the next episode, or later on the next morning, people start, he gets flowers from her, and everyone's like, whoa, how did you get flowers from the girl? And so people just assume he banged her, and he doesn't correct them. So the rumor spreads he gets in a fight with her. He tries to make it up by going on the radio show that the high school has. Excuse me. And he's like, he apologizes and says, hey, we didn't have sex, we just talked. And then that character never comes back. As far as I can tell. I don't know if she never came back, but we didn't see her. Marianne? I don't know. I'm just speaking out of turn here. I don't know. But
so
I mean,
Marianne, the rich girl, in that pilot 2-parter, all of the scenes with her, they did like really dreamy.
Right.
And a little bit creepy. Like that episode with the vampires and the X-Files.
Right.
Like sexy creepy.
Right.
It was strange. I don't know if there was like a soft focus going on, if they used a fog machine.
Well, there was fog machine on both. So one they were in a hot tub, and the other one was at the party.
A long makeout scene in the hot tub.
Yeah.
Like a really long makeout scene in the hot tub.
It was hot.
I mean, it was a hot
because they were in the hot tub.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a funny episode. That second part.
Oh, there was a whole subplot with Brenda too, where she goes and gets, because she's
Tries
from Minnesota.
To bang an older dude.
Because she's from Minnesota, most bartenders won't actually recognize the ID. So Jenny Garth's character, I keep saying Jenny, Kelly, that kind of messes with the ID so it looks like she's 21, and she gets in, and Digimon Hansu was the bouncer, and this was his first.
Is that how you pronounce his name?
That's how I've always pronounced it. How do you pronounce it?
I don't know. I thought the D was silent.
So it's just Digimon Hansu?
Isn't the D right next to the J?
It might be.
I don't know.
It could be. Anyway, it's French. But he had done a couple of music videos, but this is his first kind of like gig where he had got to talk, and he's uncredited in it. And I had to look it up. I saw him, I was like, that's not him, is it? And you're like, it might be. But I looked it up, and it was definitely him. It's not even on IMDb. I had to look it up and Google it.
The D is right next to the J.
Okay.
Like in Django. The D
Django.
is silent.
But she has this whole subplot where she gets into the bar and nobody else is able to, and they just leave. So she hangs out for a little bit, gets picked up by this older dude, and she goes on like 3 dates with him, and she's gonna sleep with him. And Kelly is like, hey, you need to tell him that you're in high school and that you're a minor. And he flips out. Rightfully so. And he's like, I'm gonna sue your parents for all the money that I spent on you on these dates.
I mean, that's a little rude.
That's a little extreme. But then, and like, she's also like fails her first week at school, and the principal calls her in like, you were a great student, you got a D on a quiz, you're gonna fail. He's nicer than that. And then the principal's like hitting on the Spanish teacher. Yeah, well, the Spanish teacher's kind of hitting on the principal at the she reciprocates. Beginning of that. No, she like puts her hand on, or she takes his hand and puts it on her chest and is like, you have to feel the Spanish or something like that. And then he like straight up asked, like, he just goes for it. Well, she was dancing after class, and he was like creeping down the hall, like sticks his head out, and then he like calls her in, and she goes, "What about dinner?" It was weird. I like how when the Spanish teacher is speaking Spanish, they put English subtitles, and then she calls him a pig, and in they English. Put it in Spanish subtitles. That was pretty good. But yeah, overall, it was funny. A good enough first episode. It was entertaining. And it set up a lot. You also had like a whole, I mean, we didn't talk about everything. There was a whole other subplot where Steven Sanders' character gets drunk at that party. Right. And gets a freshman, played by David, played by Brian Austin Green, to drive home his Corvette, and he ends up crashing the Corvette.
Right.
And they're going to do
this
insurance
first
fraud.
episode, like, all the guys kind of get into a lot of trouble and shenanigans, and then Brenda just makes bad choices and is really needy. Kelly is actually really smart in this episode.
Like, they set her up like she's just going to be like the valley girl and the popular pretty girl, but she, in a couple of different episodes that we saw her, she was very smart. Like, she, you know, later on she gives advice about like contraception and everything. Like, she plays her role very well, like that duality of trying to be popular but also look out for herself.
Right.
I was impressed with her character quite a bit.
Yeah. What was the next episode that we watched?
So the next episode we watched was actually one that several listeners recommended. It was season 1, episode 11, Isn't It Romantic? And it's when Brenda and Dylan start dating, which I did not know they dated. I did not remember this.
Ooh.
What do you want me to just summarize this one really quick before we get into it? So basically, in a nutshell, this is not the first episode with Dylan. We missed a couple episodes with him initially. Dylan was actually only supposed to be in a couple of episodes, but
he's so dreamy.
Aaron Spelling thought he would be a huge hit, and so he actually paid his salary out of his pocket.
Whoa!
Because Fox didn't want him in the show, so he paid for his salary out of his pocket, and then of course he tested very high because he was so dreamy, and they brought him in, and people thought he brought this really great depth and humor and everything.
He was definitely a cut above the rest of the actors at this point.
They're all bad, but I'd say he is the least bad.
Yeah.
But he's also way older than most of them. Here's
the thing, though. On a lot of these shows, you kind of have to match the performance of the people around you.
Yeah, that's yeah, you can't have one person who's way better than everybody else because it's just disjointed.
Well, and it's not even necessarily about better. Some things play a little bit more like a soap opera, which when you compare soap operas with regular TV, they're much more like theatrical, like acting for the stage.
Right.
You can't really have that expectation of the same level of honesty and intimacy that most actors can do when they have the time to dedicate to a script for a feature.
Right.
You know, you're trying to pump these things out and maybe you've had a week with the script.
Right, that's fair. So basically this episode, Dylan and Brandon are already friends. They're working on Brandon's car, and Brenda's kind of complaining that she decided to cancel a babysitting gig because she couldn't find Dirty Dancing at any of the video stores. And then out of nowhere, Dylan slides out from under the car. She doesn't really realize he's there, and they kind of stare at each other and have a moment. And
he's immediately kind of aggressive.
He is. He just be oh, I like what I see, kind of thing. Yeah. And he
with his buddy right there.
His buddy who happens to be the brother of the girl he's kind of objectifying.
Right. It's he slides out from under the car. What was the best case scenario? He was either hitting on this dude's girlfriend or hitting on this dude's relative of some kind.
Right. I don't know. I mean, he's the bad boy, okay?
He was a little bold.
A little bold.
A little aggressive.
So they kind of are flirting with for a little bit, and then Brenda and Brandon's dad, Mr. Walsh, kind of is is that Dylan? That guy's dad is just not a good guy. He's a really corrupt businessman, and I don't want that guy around. And Brandon's just chill, Dad. He's my friend. So then it gets really weird. The dad goes up to Dylan and is when was the last time you took a shower? He's it's been a while. And he's go take a shower. So he has this kid who he's already said he doesn't go into his house and take a shower. And then, of course, Brenda walks in and they kind of have another moment. And this whole episode's about them dating and the parents not really approving. And there's some very problematic things in this episode.
Yeah, so there's a lot of drama that goes on because Dylan stands up Brenda. Basically, Brendan, is it Brendan or Brandon? Brandon kind of corners his sister and is hey, I think he's gonna be expecting things that you're not prepared for, trying to warn her.
Right.
Her dad tries to intervene and she's yo, Dad, I want to get my rocks off. You want me to sneak around or do you want to be in the loop? She basically gives her dad an ultimate, which was honestly, I feel most teenage girls should do this.
That's fair.
She basically told her dad, what, are you gonna trust me or are you gonna make me sneak around?
Right. And then she also points out the double standard that he has with Brandon. Because she's with Brandon, you talked about making sure he has contraception and being safe. And with me, you're saying my morals aren't going to be intact if I do this.
Right.
What does that mean?
Right. So Brandon tries to kind of talk his sister out of it. When that doesn't work, and when the dad can't do it, he goes to Dylan and is like...
Well, the dad tells him to go to Dylan.
Right. Yeah, he takes it a step further. He goes to Dylan, basically, like, tells him to back off because she's a virgin, and he's gonna hurt her if he treats her the same way he treats the other girls that he's been with. Whatever. Right. So, their date rolls around. Brenda gets stood up.
Oh, she's devastated.
No phone call, no nothing. Then he, like, tries to avoid her.
Well, he misses school, and she misses the next day of school because she's so distraught.
Right.
And then it turns out there was a family thing, so we kind of skipped over a major thing where I thought I was actually more problematic. So they actually go on their first date, and they have a great time, and we find out that Dylan's dad is basically never around because he's this, like, business tycoon. So he brings Brenda back to his place, and the dad happens to be there, and the dad just, like, yells at him and, like, just berates him and basically is just a terrible father. So they, like, storm out, and Dylan just, like, picks up this potted plant outside of the house.
Oh, I thought that was later in the
episode.
No,
that was, like, beginning. That was before the...
Got it.
So, yeah, this was, like, within the first 20 minutes of the episode.
Super dramatic smashing.
So he, like, smashes this potted plant, and he's just like, ah, yeah. He's like, he yells at Brenda, and then he, like, shakes her like a baby.
She goes to, like, run away from him, and he grabs her around her upper arms.
And, like, holds her in place, and grabs her and brings her into his chest, and is like, don't go, like, I need you. And she's like let me go, you're scaring me. And he just still doesn't let go. And then eventually he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, he just gets to me. And he, like, has that, like, single tear go down his cheek. And, like, I was like, that's not okay.
Yeah, big red flag right there. And then they make out.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah.
My note was, and he says, he always gets to me, sobs. They make out.
Yeah. Like, that right there might be the moment that women across the United States justified their abusive boyfriends.
Right. Well, and then, like,
and to romanticize him losing control like that, and not cool.
Right. And then it's really strange. And then by the end of the episode, this is the episode where, like, Kelly kind of talks to Brendan's like, hey, if you're going to do this, like, you need to make sure you have contraception, and you can't trust the boys because they're going to try everything they can to not use it.
Right.
So you need to carry it. So she actually gives her some condoms to have, and she's like, you make sure they use it. The other subplot is this is a special episode about, STDs. And there's a special episode about STDs. And they're going to have this, like, guest speaker come and talk, and you had to get permission slips signed to actually go to this, like, assembly. And somehow the teacher who's supposed to go pick up the speaker, his car breaks down, and Steve Sanders goes to go pick up this girl from the airport, and it's this, like, very attractive woman, and he keeps hitting on her and pretending to be the teacher, and she keeps saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps like, come on, and then she's finally like, look, no, like, get out of my hotel room. And then at the assembly the next day, she's like, yeah, there's this really cute boy with blue eyes that I really liked, but, the moment's wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you guys all something that I couldn't tell him yesterday. I have AIDS. And then
something that I have to tell every partner for the rest of my life.
Right. And I'm going to tell you guys this, and I didn't tell him this last night. I have AIDS. And she talks about how it was her first time. She fell in love with a boy in the heat of the moment. She didn't make him wear a condom, and she got AIDS. And then because of that, Brenda talks to Dylan's like, hey, have you ever had sex without a condom? And he's like, it's been a while. And she goes, have you ever done it? Like, don't play games. Like, have you? Yes. I'm kind of scared now. And he's like, all right, I'll go get an STD test for you, kind of thing. So it's, this is kind of like the early episodes where they're still trying to make it like
they did
Monster
that right,
of the Week kind of thing.
There's so much other stuff going on with that relationship.
Right. And it's just like, and I brought it up in the, the pilot episode, they're trying to make these lessons, but there's still issues. Like, Brandon's the good guy, and he, like, makes sure that he communicates, and he respects women, but he also, by respecting women, doesn't recognize that they can do whatever the hell they want. Like,
right. Yeah, and it's tricky because on one hand they're trying to show this other side of a male character being sensitive.
Right.
But he's also, like, out of control of his emotions.
Right.
Which is not okay either.
Yeah. I like that Brandon did a slow clap when the woman with HIV, like, gets off the stage.
There was a lot going on in that episode.
Every episode is jam-packed with stuff.
It really is.
But I don't think any story or subplot suffers from any of it. Like, they all do a really good job of, like, getting every character their due, I think.
Yeah. I think my mind kind of has a hard time differentiating between, like, which episode each subplot fits into.
I mean, we watched 4 episodes in 2 days, so that makes sense. That
Right.
Or 4 hours worth of content in 2 days, so it does kind of bleed together.
After that, we watched that bromance episode.
So we watched season 5, episode 17, Sweating It Out. So we wanted to do an episode to, honor Luke Perry, so I looked up, best Dylan episodes, and this was in every list of good episodes. And
Sweating it out. They go on a dude's road trip.
Yeah, it was great.
They go up to the mountains.
They go
it's
up
like
to the
Brokeback Mountain. No, but they do get naked together.
They do.
And a bunch of other dudes.
And yeah, a couple Native Americans. But yeah, this episode was interesting. I did get to hear the more iconic version of the theme song that I was looking for, which was nice.
Right, but on the other hand, we started this episode up, and it looks like...
It
looks like a Lifetime movie. Or
yeah,
a Driver's Ed video.
It looks like a soap opera. The motion was way too smooth and everything.
Like the production quality took a
so
massive dive because this episode looked like shit.
Man.
There were some technical problems.
There were a couple technical problems in this episode.
Yeah. This was.
You want me to summarize it really quick?
It almost feels like a different show.
It does. So let me. Now, granted, this is season 5. I think
a lot happened in between.
All of them have been almost all of them are out of high school.
There's a lot more Tori Spelling.
Some of them now own businesses. So they've grown up a little bit, but basically in a nutshell, for whatever reason, I don't know, Dylan's about to lose his license. So he's like, we need to go on a road trip. So him and Brenda decide to go on a motorcycle road trip. Ryan Austin Green's character, David, is opening up some sort of club, and that makes Steve upset because it was his idea, but from some
Peach Pit After Dark.
Peach Pit After Dark, for some legal reason, he's not allowed to be involved because if his dad got involved to protect him somehow. We obviously missed a bunch. Kelly is still kind of suffering because her house blew up, and she has 2nd and 3rd degree burns all over her body.
It's a bummer when your house blows up.
Right? And she's trying to be a therapist or something, so she has to go to a conference. And Tiffany Amber Thiessen's in this.
Yeah.
And I did not know she was in the show, so I actually, while watching it, Googled it, why she was in it. And so basically she was a replacement for Shannon Doherty.
Mm-hmm.
Because Shannon Doherty always leaves shows early because everybody hates her.
She can't get along with anyone.
She can't get along with anybody on this, Charmed, or on the set of Mallrats. And so she was kind of a replacement. So that character was actually supposed to be a family friend who suffered from sexual abuse, whose dad committed suicide when she was going to go tell the cops. So she ends up moving in with the Walshes.
Dang.
So yeah, it's a pretty dark backstory. And yeah, those are the main subplots. They're opening a restaurant / nightclub. Kelly and I think her character's name was Mallory, Tiffany Thiessen's character, are going to Valerie are going to some sort of seminar for mental health classes and the road trip. So yeah, that's basically it.
So these two dudes get on the road. They stop at a diner. The waitress walks up. And they are immediately hardcore creeping on this waitress.
Their jaws drop and they're ooh, baby.
Immediately, Dylan is looking her up and down aggressively.
Yeah, it's weird.
And then he asks about the apple pie.
Is it homemade?
Is it homemade? She's like, yeah, I baked it in my own oven. Sarcastically, he's like, I'd like to see your oven.
Right.
And then Brandon's like, yeah, I would too. It was so creepy.
And then they start talking about the food, how they're just gonna eat really terrible because they're on a road trip and they're gonna have fun. And then he says something I'm gonna put anything in my mouth that she gives me or something like that.
Yeah.
It was really weird. And then she comes back how are you boys doing? And they're just whoa. They just look at her dumbfounded.
Yeah, you'd think they've been up on a mountain chopping wood for 6 months.
Right, this was the first day of their trip.
You've been on the road for 3 hours, you guys.
Right. Well, and then the next scene, Brandon is on the phone with Kelly, his girlfriend at this point, and there's some tension, when they're on their way to leave for the trip, and Kelly says goodbye to Brandon. Dylan just, stares at her, super awkwardly. And so he's on the phone with Kelly, and I'll let you talk about the technical stuff. You're the one that's in the industry. There's some weird stuff going on. But basically, she immediately is like, I hope you guys aren't, like, hitting on girls. This was immediately after the waitress scene. And she gets off the phone, and then Dylan comes out of the shower. He's like, you didn't have to wait to talk to her until I got out of the shower. And he's like, you know what, I kind of had to, because you were super creepy when we were saying goodbye. And then they get in this, like, fight, and it's like, I'm going to go home tomorrow. And, you know, there's some drama between the friendship.
And then in the beginning of that hotel room scene, speaking of technical issues,
right,
there's a freaking boom mic in the shot. Not just, okay, so, like, they cut away to Kelly, and they come back, and it's there again.
It's like
it, like,
3
leaves
times.
the frame, it comes back in, it's wandering. It's like a good 3 inches of this boom mic in the shot.
I didn't notice it the first time because I was, like, making brownies, but then you're like, Mike, come back right now, and we rebounded and watched it, like, 3 times because it was just so absurd that it made it through.
So many people had to not be doing their jobs for that to make it into the final edit.
Well, and the thing that's even crazier, this is halfway through season 5, more than halfway through season 5, which is, this is like peak 90210 time.
It's like they just gave up on every technical aspect of this. Okay, so here's what happens. Like, the boom operator's arms get tired or something, or they've just adjusted the framing. The boom operator's not in on the loop, hasn't checked his framing before they go for a take, you know, etc., etc. Boom operator's in the wrong place, so he's not doing his job properly. Camera department's not talking to him to let him know, so they're not doing their job properly. Everyone in Video Village who is watching the freaking monitors from their cushy chairs, they are not doing their jobs because they are not seeing this either. At some point, somebody should have caught that. The script supervisor, I assume, would probably, like, notate it. You know, someone's marking down which takes they're keeping from each thing. They're not doing their... It's just...
It's bad.
It's so bad.
And this isn't even, like, the only, like, mess up in this episode.
I get impatient when I see a boom in, you know, a student film.
Right. And this is one of those things where it's like when somebody is making fun of, like, when there's a movie that's self-referential, or they're like, Scary Movie had a boom in it at some point, but that was on purpose, showing, like, bad filmmaking.
Worst case scenario, you maybe see a shadow of a boom.
Right.
Not the actual boom. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It's sophomoric.
Yeah. So later on in this episode, they end up getting in that fight. And the next day, they're arguing about going back to LA or continuing the trip. And Brandon's like, I'm just going to go back. And Dylan's like, well, I'm going to go with you. And Brandon's like, no, go enjoy your road trip. And he goes, no, I've seen you ride the motorcycle. I need to make sure you don't get hurt. And he goes, oh, you do care about me. You do care about this friendship. He goes, no, I borrowed these motorcycles. I need to make sure they don't get destroyed. And then they just decide to go on the trip regardless, for whatever reason. I don't know. There's no real reason that Brandon decides to go, but they go on this trip. They make a pit stop to pee, and it happens to be on a Indian reservation. They call it a burial ground.
By the way, when they stop to pee, they're standing like 2 feet away from each other because they're standing on either side of a redwood tree. And then in the turnaround, they're standing like 2 inches
Their
away
shoulders
from
are touching each other. There's a point where their shoulders brush.
Why are they touching each other while they're peeing?
I don't know. And then, like, a cop pulls them over and then forces them to do manual labor. And it's supposed to be like a spiritual wise cop, and they're supposed to teach them a lesson, and like the lesson's kind of vague. But they end up in a sweat lodge, and they like pray to each other's grandfather. So like Dylan prays to his grandfather and is like, I just need to know that someone's watching, or to their grandfathers. And he's like, I just want to know that somebody's watching over me. And then Brandon, like, grandfather, I just want to thank you for bringing Dylan back into our lives. And it's like, you guys have been, like, dicks to each other the whole episode, and now all of a sudden you're grateful for him?
Yeah. These people all have relationship issues.
Yeah. Well, and then, like, they argue after they become friends again, where they're, like, just sitting on this log, and Dylan's like, you know, there was a point when I was digging that hole, and I kept thinking you'd be way better at digging this hole than me, and it was really just because I didn't want to dig the hole, and I realized that everybody has their flaws. Nobody's perfect. And Brandon's like, maybe what you really were thinking was, I always think everyone's out to get me, but there are people on my side. I don't know how you would get to that conclusion from the experiences they had digging a hole. But Dylan's like, no, I like mine better. And Brendan's like, you just said nobody's perfect. That's not a very good epiphany. And then they just like drive back to like LA. I didn't really get that exchange.
Yeah, I didn't either.
It didn't make any sense to me.
It didn't.
And I mean, and that's the episode. Honestly, the other subplots didn't really interest me. Like the whole thing with the restaurant nightclub opening.
It was probably popular because of the novelty of seeing these two buddies naked together, huddled in a sweat lodge.
Right. And it was, and it was, obviously we don't have the attachment to the show with all the drama that came out. Because we honestly don't know how long Dylan was out of the show before coming back. I don't know if this was before. I know he got married to some mobster's daughter who got killed like hours after they got married. I don't know if this is post that wedding. There was the whole love triangle thing that we completely missed. Obviously, Dylan was super into Kelly still, and so we don't have all that kind of like attachment. So this could have been a bigger deal to other people than it was to us.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of all the stuff that we watched.
I can't say it ruined my childhood because I had no emotional investment in it. Watching the episodes from season 1, I kind of thought, it might be fun to actually watch this show because it's such a huge part of pop culture.
Right, I kind of felt the same way.
And I do feel a little like I'm missing out on it. But then we watched that season 5 episode, and I don't know if I can do it, Mike.
I'm torn because I feel the same way, that I can see the hook and that draw as to why people wanted to watch it initially. And that season 5 episode from a technical standpoint wasn't good and it looked weird. But I also think it was really hard for us to like that episode just because we lost 5 years worth of character development.
Right. So we need to watch season 1, develop some Stockholm syndrome, and then we'll be invested.
Right. Because, I mean, we missed a bunch of stuff. Like Andrea pops up in this episode and we barely talked about her. And she was pretty big in the first couple episodes that we watched.
Right.
And she shows up and she seems to be married and she
Looking
mentions having a kid.
Old.
Well, I looked up the ages of everyone. She was the oldest at 29 when the pilot was filmed. Luke Perry was 23. Ian Ziering was 26, I think. Tori Spelling and Brian Austin Green were 17. Jenny Garth was 18, going on 19, and then Jason Priestley was 21.
Got it. Shannon Doherty?
Shannon Doherty was 19, I think.
They're kids.
So some of them were young and could be like Shannon Doherty looked close enough to a high school student. She looked young. She still had that baby fat. Jenny Garth was young still. She looked young and innocent.
I wonder if Shannon Doherty would still be such a beezy to absolutely everyone she worked with if she wasn't on such a successful show so early in her career.
I have no idea.
The world will never know.
Nope. Parallel dimension, maybe. But yeah, I'm curious. I can't say this ruined my childhood because it wasn't a big thing to me, but I'm glad I got to see one episode with a good theme song. That made me happy.
Whatever.
And I'm kind of curious to go back. I'm not sure. So, Katrina, what are we going to be covering on our next episode?
We're going to keep it local. We are watching Troop Beverly Hills.
I love that movie.
I love that movie so much.
I'm really excited to watch that.
Do the Freddy.
I don't remember that.
Oh my god, it's the dance.
I don't remember that. We're going to watch it.
It's so good.
But yeah, definitely watching Beverly Hills 90210 made me immediately think of Troop Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's going to be great. And of course, tell us what you remember about that show. Tweet at us, send us an email, hit us on Facebook or Instagram.
Has anyone ever sent us an email?
Yes. It's been a long time though. I don't really talk about the email very often just because so many people just comment directly on our social media. But Katrina, where can our fans find you?
I'm all over the internet at Katrinaosity. Check out my YouTube channel. What is our email address?
It's just mdxpods@gmail.com.
Oh, there we go.
So super easy. You can check out everything that's MDXpods related at Instagram. Honestly, it's the easiest place. We have a super link in our bio, and it brings you to all of our other links. So it'll have links to all of our social media,
hit that
all
IG,
the different platforms for actually listening to the podcast. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. Check it out. Check out our other podcast, Remake Rewind. Support us on patreon.com/MDXpods. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Bye. I love you.